Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Dr. Lott, I'd like to invite you to respond to some of the points made, particularly with regard to the false positives on background checks and anything else mentioned during that exchange.
Sure. Well, there's a series of things. So I just say, if you look around the world, not just in the United States, in places like Chicago and Washington, D.C., that have banned guns, every single time murder rates have gone up, and they've gone up by a lot. You think out of randomness, one time when either all guns have been banned or all handguns have been banned, you'd see the murder rates fall or even stay the same, but there's every time it's gone up. With regard to the background checks, what it was being referred to was a small sample of about 400 cases out of the 76,000 that were sampled. And of that 400 non-random sample, you'd think if you're going to test something, at least you're going to have a random sample. But they didn't even use a random sample, and it was after a couple stages of review that had already removed a lot of the false positives there. So the report that was put out by the Obama administration, I think, was pretty much useless on that. If you go through and look at the last annual report that was put out on NICS in 2010, there were 76,000 initial denials. The first stage of review, which is done by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the national office, no discretion, basically just checking to make sure paperwork and everything's okay, no lawyers looking at it. 94% of the cases were dropped at that stage. When Congress in 2004 did a 10-year review of the Brady Act, they did an audit of the second stage of review, which is done by the BATF field offices. At that point, another 2 percentage points of the cases. Again, no discretion. So just the first 2 stages of review, you have 96% of the cases there with no discretion. You can talk to people who actually run these things. Reagan Dunn, who was the first director of Project Safe Neighborhoods, he was in charge of enforcing these things. He tells you, and he's been quoted in the New York Times and other places, saying that they would have loved to go after these cases. The reason why in 2010 you have 76,000 denials and only 28 prosecutions and 13 convictions is because the others aren't real cases. And unfortunately, it's primarily minorities that are overwhelmingly harmed. When you look at things like roughly phonetically similar names and similar birthdays, people tend to have names similar to others in their racial groups. Hispanics have names similar to Hispanics. Blacks have names similar to other blacks. 30% of black males in the United States are legally prohibited from owning guns because of past criminal history. It discriminates overwhelmingly against minorities. They're the ones who are hurt by these mistakes. And with regard to the concealed carry statistics, I'll just mention there are dozens of studies. One is pointed to in this case, but there are other studies that have used synthetic controls, the same data, the same types of specifications, and showing that with tiny changes, they actually get the opposite results of what was claimed. And those were published in peer-reviewed journals even before the one that was referenced earlier.
In constructing the non-random sample selection mechanism, why would one do that? Isn't it ordinarily, when you're trying to research data, isn't a random sample selection mechanism sort of the meat and potatoes of that?
You have to do a random.
So why would one choose not to do that?
I don't know, and I've asked the FBI multiple times. I've contacted people there, and they will not provide an answer for why they picked a non-random sample.
In the minute I've got left, I'd like to hear from either Dr. Lott or Dr. Hupp. You mentioned, it was mentioned earlier what states might be able to do. I think it's important for states to be able to act. States are, in fact, designed to be the laboratories of Republican democracy within our system. Is there anything in your state, your respective states, that you wish you would see passed into law?
Well, I just mentioned one thing that's come up a couple times, and that's school shootings. The Crime Prevention Research Center, we just finished a report recently where we looked at all school shootings from accidents through mass public shootings from 2000 through 2018. And there's not one attack, one shooting of any type where anybody's been injured or killed in any of the schools that allow teachers to carry. You have 20 states that, to varying degrees, including Utah and Hasson's New Hampshire, where basically any teacher has a concealed carry permit is able to go and carry. You have other states, Texas, you have over a third of the school districts by last fall allowed people to carry. Not one attack. at any of these places where one person's been injured by a shot or killed, and it should tell you something there. The types of fears that people have about students getting a hold of guns, or a teacher accidentally shooting somebody, or they're shooting a bystander, people shooting bystanders in mass public shootings, simply don't occur. It's easy for people in these debates to talk about things that might possibly happen, but in this case, with 20 states actually experimenting with this, Utah's had it for 20 years, we don't need to go and guess about what the experience is in these places.
The gentleman's time has expired.